The Florida Historical Society presents Florida Frontiers is made possible in part by the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund and by
The historic Rossiter House Museum and Gardens is in the O'Galley section of Melbourne, Florida. Preserved as it was in the early 20th century, historic tours of the Rossiter House include antiques, artifacts, and family heirlooms, and the 1865 Houston Family Cemetery. The last resident of the home was successful businesswoman and philanthropist Caroline P. Rossiter. The historic Rossiter House Museum and Gardens is available for weddings and other special events.
The Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, the Florida Council of Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida. COVID-19 forced the Florida Historical Society to cancel its plans for their annual meeting and symposium in May 2020, so instead they held a virtual annual meeting and symposium in October. Welcome to Florida Frontiers, presented by the Florida Historical Society. I'm Ben Brotmarkle. One of the sessions presented at the conference was called Civil Rights, Equality, and Racial Justice in the Age of Black Lives Matter. The panel included Tracy Moore, immediate past president of the Florida Historical Society, Dr. David Jackson, history professor and department chair from Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Dr. Paul Ortiz, director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and Dr. Abel Bartley, a native of Jacksonville, Florida, and chair of Pan-African Studies at Clemson University.
The Africans were brought to the Americas to serve as workers, as slaves, and they were reduced in value. That is, they were not considered human, they were not considered equal to whites. And then you have the Civil War, you have the 13th, the 14th, 15th Amendment, which gives us citizenship, which is a legal, the 14th and 15th Amendment try to legally make us into equal to whites. But then you have the courts undermining what the legislature had done with Cruikshank and others. And so, you know, with the Cruikshank cases in particular, and I'm at the same time let people look it up, but you have a situation where the federal government says, I'm not going to protect the notion of Black life, I'm going to let the states do it. And the states, particularly the states that had slavery, they said, we don't value those lives, so we're not going to prosecute people who killed them. And so you have this long history of whites being able to get away with murdering African Americans. Then you get 1955, and you have a young man killed in Mississippi, and people see the brutality of that killing, and it touches the heart and empathy of some whites who say, I guess blacks do matter in a small way. And so you get a movement started. And the thing that's so important in listening to my two esteemed colleagues speak earlier, you get this movement slowly building, because the civil rights movement, to me, the thing that is most incredible is that those people who went out and protested for African-American civil rights, their lives didn't matter. Whites could kill them and nothing was going to happen. No white was going to go to jail for killing any African American, and they knew that. And yet they had the courage to stand up and say, my life matters even if it doesn't matter to you. And then we get to Trayvon Martin, and now we get to George Floyd. You get to having a president, and I think that the most incredible thing, I am so proud of this generation, is because they have stood up and said, we matter. Our lives matter just as much as your lives matter. When we die, it's just as significant as when you die. And somebody needs to be accountable for that. And I think what you're doing, linking that back to Africa, Africans put a very high value on human life. And for a country like the United States, who says we put a high value, I've had almost every president talks about a culture of life. And yet, they are only talking about one group of lives. It's amazing, this generation, I'm so proud to see so many young whites involved in all that, who are saying, you're right, all our lives matter or none of our lives matter. And that's what I think is important. We are finally beginning to live up to the motto that is so prevalent, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal and thereby endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable life. Life being number one, liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And so finally, we're trying to return the big mirror on the United States, because America has this big boast of being this and being that. And what these young people have done is turn the mirror on the United States and say, you say you're this, but look at yourself. This is what you actually are. And that's why I think this movement and this moment is so important, because it's forcing America to look at itself and say, yeah, we have these wonderful proclamations, but this is what we're really like. And that's why I think that this moment is so important. And I think for people in Africa, people in Asia, people in Latin America, that's why they are joining this movement, because they're saying amen, the same thing. You tell us one thing, but then you do something else. And they're forcing America to stand up and be American. And that's what I think is so important about this moment and about these young people. Because you take a Trayvon Martin, you take a George Floyd, you take a Breonna Taylor, all these people, they weren't presidents, but they were people who mattered to their community, and now they matter to the world. Yeah, there are probably more people who know George Floyd's name than know any of the politicians we have elected in Congress. Why? Because people have said that name mattered. Breonna Taylor's name mattered. And that's what I think is so important. We have elevated African Americans finally up to the point where our lives are equal to the lives of whites. And I think if we can just keep this momentum going and make America recognize that if nobody, like what Dr. King says, if you treat one person unfairly, you're treating all of us unfairly. And that's why I think this moment is so important. And I hope the momentum can survive.
And let me just add, thank you, Ava. I think that's outstanding, your points that you and Paul have shared. And I think that we have to be clear in stating that it's an ongoing endeavor. So we are arguing for the fact that Black Lives Matter, but we know that there's a strong contingency of people who have a counter movement to undermine the value of Black Lives Matter, right? And so one of the things I will share is that, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is that I think one of the unintended benefits of integrating the public school system has been that you have a diverse group of people who are attending school together. So you can no longer say this person has a tail and perpetuate myths and stereotypes about different people of different ethnic groups. That I've even seen a case where there's a parent of a student who went to school with my children who was making some very right-wing assertions, but his daughter, who is about 20 years old, was resisting her father. And right, so we see a generational shift in terms of how this younger generation, and that's what gives me promise as well, is that we see in this case, unlike the movement of the 60s where you had predominantly African Americans, you can look at different places in the country, in Portland and other places, and you see mostly white people out protesting, right? So that gives me some hope that change is on the horizon. And Tracy, if I can just share one interesting conundrum of the whole movement that's taking place for me and for many of us who are raising minority children in this country. I stated about the golden days of growing up for me in Atlanta, but at the same time, from 1979 to around 1981, when I was in middle school, it was also a time of the missing and murdered children in Atlanta. And so a lot of our childhood was snatched away from us at that time. And I can remember presentations being done at the school. They had a cartoon show that they would bring in to show to the children. It was called Patch the Pony. And basically the essence of it was that Patch the Pony was encouraging children not to talk to strangers, right? And you all have to understand, for me growing up, I mean, the conditions were so severe that my mother would not let me ride home on my bicycle alone. If I was at a friend's house, my mother would come down to my friend's house and she would follow me back to our house in the car rather than risk me going back home by myself. And I will also confess that, you know, we used to carry weapons around on us at that time because we didn't know if someone was going to try to kidnap us, right? So I grew up with this notion that you don't talk to strangers. That's why for me, it created so much cognitive dissonance with the murder of Trayvon Martin, because here you have a young man who was minding his own business, walking back to his father's house, and you have a stranger that came up to him trying to engage with him. And here I am, the person that was taught, hey, you never talk to strangers. When he tries to get away from this person, he pursues him, gets into a fight with this person, and ends up killing this teenager. And then he gets off for killing the teenager. And so for me, the conundrum in raising a Black male was, what do I tell my children? Do I tell my son, hey, I guess you need to, any stranger that comes up to you that's white, you need to stop and explain to them who they are, who you are? Or do I tell them, you know, ignore people that you don't know, run away from them, right? So it created this kind of dilemma in terms of what do we tell our children in order for them to survive in American society. And in many instances, you know, if you say, hey, you comply with the police, if you don't comply with the police, you never know what the outcome may be. And so that, I think for us, causes us to lose a lot of sleep at night when we continue to see these incidences occur. Person after person, there's such conditioning that has taken place, right? I tell people all the time that the only thing, these types of murders against minorities, African Americans, Black women, they have been occurring in American society. The big difference is that it's on camera. People have cell phones, there are cameras around in the society. So we have it on camera now, just like with the Rodney King incident. So it's more ubiquitous around us, but these things have been taking place. And one of the things that's shocking about it is that even though the police officers now have cameras on their persons, that they are so conditioned into brutalizing African Americans that it doesn't even matter, right? They still act in a way as if they're not on camera. And so if you look at the officers that killed George Floyd, they knew they were being videoed. If you look at the people who hunted down Ahmaud Arbery, those individuals videotaped what was taking place. And so this has created another kind of dilemma for us. And I'm going to make one last point here, and I'm going to be quiet, right? Is that one of the things I've learned from this, everything that's taken place. I can remember reading a book by Dr. John Henry Clark. And one of the things that Dr. Clark said, he was a renowned historian. He said that when he was growing up in Union Springs, Alabama, he believed that every white person was a police. And for me, that didn't really make sense to me until I started to think about what he was saying. And what I see taking place in this country is that, and excuse me for being blunt about this, there's a lot of people in this country that don't like to mind their own business, or they feel offended if African Americans say something to them, even if they're correcting them. So the brother who was in Central Park up in New York, who asked a lady to put her dog on a leash, where she was offended by the notion that this guy would even say something to her. So she wanted to dramatize the moment to make it seem like she was being threatened. If you look at the young man that went into Kenosha, Wisconsin, he felt like he had a license to take a military style weapon into that environment to police African-American people. And so I think, you know, we have to think about the fact that people feel empowered in this day for some reason, that they have been deputized, in fact, to be police officers. Like, even if it's none of their business, instead of staying away out of what's taking place. And we've seen these incidences on TikTok and Instagram and all these places. People start sticking their nose in business that has nothing to do with them at all, but they feel like they have the authority to do so by virtue of them being white in American society. So I think that, you know, this movement is bringing to light a lot of these different variables and factors that that we hope we can change as we continue to propel this movement along.
One of the things you talked about was the talk. There is something called the talk in our community. People of color each one have a talk with their children for their protection, as you said, more than anything else, so that you know how to react when something occurs that you know has to do with just based on the color of your skin. That kind of talk, I grew up with brothers and I was the only girl. So I was, always listening to what was being said to my brothers, but I knew it applied to me as well. I had instances where I was asked to do and be and get back. And I've even had an opportunity in my childhood to witness a Klan burning in a field, a rally, so to speak, so that they were, I guess celebrating whatever they had just previously done or was just meeting together. But I had an opportunity at that time to capture that fear, that trauma that exists, to any child or any individual, whether you're of any age, that trauma. So when you're talking about the trauma that exists for us, for people of color, that trauma plays a important role in how we react to anything that occurs to us as individuals. So the talk is something that most people are having today, but isn't that talk different for all people? The talk for one situation for a white family versus the talk, so to speak, for a white family who you may say have the advantage because they feel, like you say, privileged, have the right to, have the ability to ask a question that you think may be offensive. So you come into a situation as you're growing up and as you're trying to help an individual, be it your niece, nephew, or even yourself in a given situation, that you do have to learn how to live in this America. How do we as historians look at this period where we have to provide that type of security, I call it security, for our communities? Because if that is not talked about, if that is not discussed, if that is not carried down from generation to generation, because it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed from my generation to today's generation. The same talk that my parents had with me is the same talk that I have with my nephews. It's the same talk that I have to say to my nieces. Personally, I've been stopped by police, actually made to get in the police car, believe it or not. Instead of staying in my own car, I was asked to get in his car for no reason. Had to stay there for at least a half an hour for him to check my ID, whatever. I really didn't, I was frightened, but I never let him know I was afraid. But I eventually let go, of course, because there was no reason for him to have stopped me. But there were certain things that I knew that I shouldn't say. There were certain things that movements or, reaction to whatever the action was that he was doing that I knew was going to create a safety between me and that individual, so nothing would go wrong, so to speak. So what is it that you think his history will say about this particular thing that we have to do and people of color have to do and have had to do from the very beginning, even from slavery?
One of the things, Tracy, thinking about the talk, and I remember after my sister and I moved back in with my father, and the boys became teenagers, we got the talk from my father. It was very interesting. My father was a very conservative Hispanic individual, factory worker, and I think voted for Ronald Reagan twice. Still love him, but he was very anti-police. And I never understood this as a kid, but he would always tell us, you stay away from the police. They can only cause you trouble, boy. And he was very explicit about that. I remember by the time my brothers and I entered teenagerhood, if you will, he literally farmed us out. He sent us to work on a farm in the summers. And I didn't understand why. And as a kid, it was kind of a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I wanted to be with my friends in the city. Here I was in the countryside. but I did get to learn how to ride a horse. That was really cool. You know, worked on the farm and everything. But, you know, later on I found out it was because we had just started getting into trouble with the cops. And they came looking for us as young, you know, Chicano Mexican-American kids. We didn't look for them, you know, no way. But my father, that was, you know, to save our lives. And I didn't know it at the time, but I later was able to thank my father for doing that. I think one of the things that was mentioned earlier, and what David points out and what you pointed out, we have a white problem in the society. It's not a race problem. It's a white people's problem. This idea that all white people are somehow deputized to be junior law enforcement officers, that's deeply historical. So as historians, we can go back to the Texas Rangers, we can go back to the Ku Klux Klan, we can go back to the Chicago police force in the 1900s, and we can pinpoint those moments. We can talk about Red Summer. We can talk about the Elaine Massacre. We can talk about the Ocoee Race Massacre, Election Day Massacre in Florida. And in every case, white people become these deputies of the state. They engage in horrific acts of anti-Black or anti-Mexican violence. This is the pattern of abuse that we have to break in the society. That's what I mean when I say we have a white problem. How do we change this mentality among the George Zimmermans to be, right? Whether they're immigrants or newcomers or white people or whatever, how do we get them out of that mindset of, I need to be an informant, I need to be an arm of the state to police Black and brown people? That's what we have to get them out of. And one of the things I see that's really positive happening that I'm so proud of my fellow scholars, and yeah, again, it's the young people leading, right? It's Congressman John Lewis who reminded us, get into good trouble, right? And I have to say this, and I had the honor to be with a group of UF students. We went to Indianola, Mississippi in 2008, the summer before the 2008 presidential election. We know how historic that was. And Congressman John Lewis spoke directly to us in an auditorium filled with Head Start children from the Indianola school system. And it was such an amazing experience because Congressman Lewis talked directly to the high school students and the college students. He said, look, I'm an old man now, but when I was your age, I was getting arrested for good trouble. I was shaking things up. He said, don't wait until you're an adult. Don't let people tell you you have to wait until you're in a position of power to try to change power. And that lesson really stuck with those kids. I mean, it's just amazing. But getting back, and I'll kind of conclude with this comment, anti-racism education needs historians badly, right? Every day now, there are scores of organizations. You know, I've talked to Christian groups, Jewish, Muslim, secular, who are doing anti-racist education. But here's what they need, Tracy. They need historical content. They need to be able to unpack, where do white people get these ideas from, okay? It isn't good enough to just talk about white privilege. It isn't good enough to just talk about, you know, how white people become anti-racist. We have to also, as historians, tell them how you became racists, okay? How you grew up in a culture that was fundamentally systemically racist. And I think I'm so excited the work we can do as historians to do that.
Dr. Bartley, do you have any comments?
Yeah, let me just piggyback on very wonderful conversation from both Paul and David. But I grew up, like I said, I went to integrated schools my whole life. And one of my best friends, we've been friends since 6th grade, but he's a conservative Republican. And until 2008, we could talk politics. After 2008, the water became so poisoned that we talk football, we talk family, we talk weather, but if we ever get to politics, the strains are just too deep. And the greatest moment for African Americans was seeing the election of Barack Obama. But I noticed that for my white brother, particularly my friend, that to him was a sign that what he had, we were coming for. And the politics has gotten more and more brutal in that now, if you're on one side, the other side is not just has wrong ideas, they're the devil. I mean, it's an intense hatred of. And so we cannot have this discourse, this intellectual discourse anymore because it's so heated.
The panel discussion, Civil Rights, Equality, and Racial Justice in the Age of Black Lives Matter, was presented as part of the Florida Historical Society virtual annual meeting and symposium in October 2020. You can see the entire conversation at myfloridahistory.org. You've been watching Florida Frontiers, presented by the Florida Historical Society. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ben Brotmarkle. The Florida Historical Society presents Florida Frontiers is made possible in part by the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund and by
The historic Rossiter House Museum and Gardens is in the O'Galley section of Melbourne, Florida. The historic Rossiter House Museum and Gardens is available for weddings and other special events.
the Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs, the Florida Council of Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida.